My name is Dorothy Williams, and I'm 72 years old. The lines on my face tell stories of laughter, heartbreak, and hard-won wisdom. For 38 years, I built a life with my husband Gerald in our modest home on Maple Street. I thought I knew what loyalty meant. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening in October, the kind of evening where the air smells like wood smoke and fallen leaves. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one with the worn velvet cushion, watching my cooking show. My daughter Patricia sat beside me on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. That's when my son-in-law Marcus walked in. Marcus was 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with a sharp jaw and eyes that never quite met yours when he spoke. He'd been married to Patricia for 12 years. They lived across town, but lately, he'd been stopping by more often. Too often, he didn't say hello. He didn't smile. He walked straight to the television and turned it off. The silence felt heavy. "Go to your room, old lady," he said, his voice flat and cold. "This is my living room now." I felt the words like a slap. My mouth went dry. I looked at Patricia, waiting for her to defend me, to tell him this was my home. But she just looked away, her eyes fixed on the carpet. The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in. This was the house where I'd raised my children, where Gerald and I had danced in the kitchen, where we'd celebrated birthdays and mourned losses. I stood slowly, my knees aching. I grabbed my keys from the side table, my hands trembling. Without a word, I walked to the door and left. I drove to my friend Helen's apartment downtown. Helen was 70, with silver hair and a spirit that age couldn't dim. She took one look at my face and put the kettle on. "Tell me everything," she said softly. I told her about Marcus's words, about Patricia's silence, about feeling invisible in my own home. Helen listened without interrupting, her hand warm on mine. "You deserve better than this, Dorothy," she said when I finished. "But don't do anything hasty. Sometimes the universe has its own way of setting things right." I stayed at Helen's that night, and the next, and the one after that. On the third day, a doorbell rang at Helen's apartment. She answered it while I sat in the kitchen, my heart pounding. "Is Dorothy Williams here?" a man's voice asked. I recognized that voice. It was Daniel Thornton, the attorney who'd handled Gerald's will when he passed 5 years ago. Daniel was in his 60s, distinguished-looking with silver temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Helen showed him in. He carried a leather briefcase and wore a navy suit that had seen better days but was still respectable. "Mrs. Williams," he said, sitting across from me at the small kitchen table. "I apologize for the intrusion, but something has come to my attention that requires immediate discussion." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "3 days ago, your daughter Patricia came to my office. She wanted to discuss transferring the deed of your house into her name. She claimed you were becoming forgetful and needed help managing your affairs." My blood ran cold. "She had papers drawn up," Daniel continued, "papers that would give her full ownership. She asked me to bring them to you for signature." I couldn't speak. "My own daughter," Daniel leaned forward. "Mrs. Williams, I've known you for years. You're as sharp as anyone I know. When Patricia described you as incapacitated, I knew something was wrong. So I did some investigating." He pulled out more papers. "Your son-in-law Marcus recently lost his job. He's $60,000 in debt. Gambling, mostly. He and Patricia are facing foreclosure on their own home. I believe they intended to sell your house to cover their debts." The room spun. Helen steadied me with the hand on my shoulder. "What can I do?" I whispered. Daniel's expression softened. "You can protect yourself. And if you choose, you can teach them a valuable lesson about respect and consequences." Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel helped me put a plan in motion. First, we secured my assets. The house, my savings, everything Gerald had left me was protected in a trust that Patricia couldn't touch. Then, we waited. Patricia called me repeatedly. Her voice on the messages progressed from annoyed to worried to desperate. "Mom, where are you? We need to talk. There are some papers you need to sign. It's important." I didn't answer. Instead, I called my son Robert. Robert was 42. A carpenter with gentle hands and his father's steady heart. He lived 2 hours away with his wife, Amanda, and their 3 children. When I told him what had happened, he was furious. "I'm coming to get you," he said. "You'll stay with us." "Not yet," I told him. "I need to finish something first." On the 15th day, I returned to my house on Maple Street. Patricia's car was in the driveway. I could see her pacing through the front window. When I walked through the door, she rushed to me. "Mom, where have you been? We've been worried sick." I looked at her carefully, really looked at her. My daughter had my eyes, but none of my strength. She'd always taken the easy path, always looked for shortcuts. "Have you?" I asked quietly. Marcus appeared from the kitchen. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mrs. Williams," he started, but I held up my hand. "This is my house," I said clearly. "My name is on the deed. Gerald left it to me. It will never be yours." Patricia's face crumpled. "Mom, we're in trouble. We need help. If we could just borrow against the house." "You didn't ask to borrow," I interrupted. "You tried to steal." "There's a difference." I sat down in my armchair, the one I'd been sitting in when Marcus told me to go to my room. "For 38 years, I took care of this family," I said. "I cooked every meal. I cleaned every mess. I worked 2 jobs when your father got sick so we wouldn't lose this house. I gave you everything I had." Tears rolled down my cheeks, but my voice stayed steady. All I asked for was respect, basic human kindness, and when I needed it most, you looked away. Patricia was crying now too. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was scared. We were going to lose everything." Marcus said. "Marcus is your husband," I said. "I'm your mother. You made your choice." I stood up and walked to the door, opening it wide. "I want you both to leave now." Marcus grabbed Patricia's arm, but she pulled away. "Mom, please," she begged. "Don't do this. We're family." "Family doesn't discard family," said softly. "You taught me that." After they left, I called Robert. This time, I accepted his invitation. I spent 3 months living with Robert and Amanda. Their home was full of noise and laughter and love. The grandchildren climbed into my lap to hear stories. Amanda taught me to use a tablet. Robert built me a bookshelf for my room. One evening, as I helped Amanda prepare dinner, she said, "Patricia has been calling Robert. She wants to apologize to you." I chopped carrots in silence for a moment. "What does Robert think?" I asked. "He thinks you get to decide when you're ready, if ever." I thought about revenge, about how satisfying it had felt to turn Patricia away. But I also thought about Gerald, and how he'd always said that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. "Tell Patricia she can come for Sunday dinner," I said. "Just her, not Marcus." That Sunday, Patricia arrived with red eyes and trembling hands. She sat across from me at Robert's dining table, surrounded by family, and said the words I'd been waiting to hear. "I failed you, Mom. I was selfish and scared, and I failed you when you needed me most. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I see what I did, and I'm ashamed." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Love means showing up," I said, "even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You forgot that, but I'm willing to help you remember. It took time. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight." Patricia and Marcus eventually divorced. She got a job at the local library and started rebuilding her life, one small choice at a time. I sold the house on Maple Street. Too many painful memories lived in those walls. I bought a small cottage near Robert's family, with a garden where I grow tomatoes and roses. Patricia visits every Sunday. We drink tea on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes she cries. Sometimes I do too. But we show up for each other now. That's what matters. Revenge felt good for a moment, but forgiveness feels good for a lifetime. The real victory wasn't in turning them away. It was in choosing, eventually, to open the door again. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserve peace. I'm 72 years old, and I've learned that kindness is a choice we make every single day. Sometimes that kindness means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means second chances, and sometimes it means knowing the difference